Parasympathetic innervation to the fallopian tubes from the hypogastric plexus and pelvic splanchnic nerves regulates the activity of the smooth muscles and blood vessels. Uterus. The uterus is a muscular innervated pear-shaped hollow. या अल्लाह कहाँ चला गया क्या hollow follow Okay, uterus. The uterus is a muscular innervated pear-shaped hollow, thick-walled organ that opens to the vagina at the cervix, and then widens toward the top where the uterine tubes enter. Its anatomic regions include the fundus, body cervix. The fundus is the uppermost dome-shaped extension of the uterine body located above the point of the entry of the fallopian tube. The body is enlarged. The main portion, the cervix, is a downward constrict extension of the uterus that opens into the vagina. The uterus is located anteriorly between the urinary bladder, posteriorly between the sigmoid colon and the rectum. When the bladder is empty, the uterus angle forward over the bladder. As the bladder fills, the uterus is lifted dorsally and may become retroflexed, pressing against the rectum. The nulliparous uterus is approximately 8 cm long, 5 cm wide, and 2.5 cm thick. Weighs approximately 40 to 50 grams. The uterine wall of the fundus of the body consists of 3 layers: the endometrium, the myometrium, and the serosa, also known as the adventitia. The uterine mucosa layer consists of simple columnar epithelium supported by a lamina propria, simple tubular glands, and extend from the luminal surface into the lamina propria. The stratum functional is the temporary layer at the luminal surface that responds to ovarian hormones by undergoing cyclic thickening shedding. The stratum vaccelli is the deeper, thinner, permanent layer that contains the basal portion of the endometrial glands. This layer is retained during menstruation. The epithelial cells lining these glands divided and cover the raw surface of exposed endometrium that occurs during menstruation, and the endometrium receives a double blood supply in the middle of the myometrium. A pair of uterine arteries branch to form the arcuate arteries and arteries. These arteries. Where is arteries? कहाँ चली गई मैं? या अल्लाह. The uterine wall of the fundus body consists 3 layers: endometrium, myometrium, serosa. The uterine layer consists simple columnar epithelium, lamina propria. Simple tubular gland extend from the luminal surface into the lamina propria. Stratum functionally is the temporary layer at the luminal surface that responds to ovarian hormone by undergoing cyclic thickening and shedding. The stratum bacilli is the deeper, thinner, permanent layer that contains the basal portion of the endometrial glands, and this layer is retained during menstruation. The epithelial cells lining these glands divide and cover the raw surface of exposed endometrium that occurs during menstruation. The endometrium receives a double blood supply in the middle of the myometrium. A pair of uterine arteries branch to form the arcuate arteries. These arteries then bifurcate into 2 sets. An anterior view of the female internal genital anatomy showing the relationships of the ovaries fallopian tubes, uterus, cervix, and vagina. Okay, ovarian ligament, body of uterus, fundus of uterus, uterine cavity, ampulla, fallopian tube, oviduct, fimbriae, egg cell, follicle, endometrium, myometrium, perimetrium, cervical canal, cervix, vagina, ovary, round ligament, broad ligament, suspensory ligament. 10, 11, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay. Two sets of arteries, straight arteries to the stratum basilae, and coiled arteries to the functionalis. The double blood supply to the endometrium is important in the cyclic setting of the functionalis. The straight arteries are retained during the process. This process, while the coiled arteries are lost. The myometrium is composed of four poorly defined layers of smooth muscle that are thickest at the top of the uterus. The middle layer contains the abundant arcuate arteries. The outer layer of the uterus consists of two type of outer coverings. A cap of serosa covers the fundus, and the body is surrounded by an adventitia of loose connective tissue. Structurally, the cervix is made mostly of dense connective tissue, is usually 2.5 to 3 centimeter in length, and is covered interiorly by a mucosal secreting ciliated epithelium at the upper region, and by stratified squamous epithelium at the vagina, and the opening of the cervix into the vagina occurs at most a right angle to the long axis of the vagina. Uterine blood supply is provided via the uterine and ovarian arteries. The venous return traveling via the uterine veins. The hypogastric and ovarian nerve plexus supply sympathetic, parasympathetic fibers as well as carry uterine afferent sensory fibers on their way to spinal cord at T11, T12. Anderson, Gendry, 2007, cards 12. Vagina. Hi Allah. Vagina is a thin-walled tube extending from the external valve to the cervix. Its walls are normally in a position and flattened but can stretch greatly as observed during childbirth. The length of the vaginal walls varies greatly, but on average the anterior vaginal length is 6 to 9 centimeter and posterior vaginal length is 8 to 12 centimeter. So what anterior 6 to 9 centimeter and posterior 8 to 11. Corton 2012, cards 2012. Cats. Okay. The upper portion of the vagina encircle the vaginal portion of the cervix. The vagina touches the empty bladder on the ventral and superior surface. Inferiorly, it adheres to the posterior wall of the urethra and open adjacent to the labia minora. Okay, the internal mucosal layer of the vagina contains transverse folds known as rugae. This muscular canal extends from the midpoint of the cervix to its opening located between the urethra and the rectum. The mucous membrane lining the vagina and musculature is continuous with the uterus. The vaginal wall can be easily separated because their surfaces are normally moist. lubricated by a vessel vaginal fluid. Vaginal wall is composed of 3 layers: 1 mucosa, 2 muscle, 3 adventitia. Vaginal epithelium is stratified squamous epithelium supported by a thick lamina propria. The lamina propria has many thin walled blood vessels that contribute to diffusion of vaginal fluid across the epithelium. The lamina propria of the mucosa contain many elastic fibers as well as a dense network of the blood vessel, lymph node, and nerve supply. To a much lesser degree than seen in the skin, this epithelium undergoes hormone-related cyclic changes, including slight keratinization of the superficial cells during the menstrual cycle. The epithelium has no glands, so it does not secrete mucus. Release of estrogen causes the epithelium to thicken, differentiate, accumulate glycogen. Vaginal bacteria metabolize the glycogen to lactic acid, causing the typically low pH of the vaginal environment. Loose connective tissue containing many elastic fiber is found underneath the vaginal epithelium, which has a subdermal layer rich in capillaries. This rich vascular supply is the source for vaginal moistening during sexual stimulation. Within the epithelium lie the smooth muscles of muscularis, which are oriented longitudinally on the outer layer as circular bundles on the inner layer. The outer layer adventitia consists of dense and connective tissue with many elastic fiber, which provides structural support for the vagina. It contains an extensive nerve supply, venous capillaries. The adventitia is elastic and rich in collagen, provides structural support to the vagina, allows for expansion of the vagina during intercourse and childbirth. The upper two-thirds of the vagina receives afferent innervation through the uterovaginal plexus, which contains both sympathetic parasympathetic fiber. The pelvic splanchnic nerves provide the parasympathetic afferent input the uterovaginal plexus. The proximal two-thirds of the vagina innervated via uterovaginal plexus. The lower vagina receives autonomic afferent innervation from the pudendal nerve, and the distal one-third of the vagina has primarily somatic sensation. This innervation arises from the pudendal nerve and is carried to the sacral spinal cord.